Is the First Avenger underrated?
Hey! Let's hear it for Captain America!
We are nearing the end of Phase 1 of the MCU with only one film to go after this one, and as conflicting as some of these films have been, they all still hold a special place in my heart. I mean, I grew up with them. But out of all of them, obviously excluding the Avengers, Captain America the First Avenger is on top of that list when it comes to these origin stories in Phase 1. Those that know me know the answer to this, but when I'm asked about who my favorite Marvel superhero is, it's a pretty easy answer for me. It's Captain America. It's Steve Rogers. And why, you may ask? I feel like most kids lean towards Spider-Man, the Hulk, Iron Man. I mean, they're all pretty cool, and Captain America is the old guy from 1942 who was World War II propaganda. Well, I think the answer is pretty simple. His costume was blue, and when I was a kid, everything that was blue was my favorite character, which is a little strange because I'm a massive Chicago Bulls fan. This episode is less of a breakdown and more of a homage to the film, as I feel it's barely talked amongst MCU fans when they discuss the first phase of the universe. So let's not waste any more time. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Multiversal Knight, and let's jump back in time to May 22nd, 2011 and rewatch Captain America is a very complex character, and I know on surface level it doesn't really look like it, and it also really depends on who's writing him. I feel like amongst most audiences there's a giant misunderstanding when it comes to understanding Steve Rogers and his morals. Originally created for war propaganda during World War II, his character has then since evolved to a more morally driven character instead of one who uses America's beliefs to drive his points. Unless he's in an X-Men media where all of that gets thrown out the window, or in this Marvel video game that'll never come out.
That's far enough! I'm here on the business of the United States government.
Yours is not the only business here.
Unless you were truly a comic book fan and dove into the comics and read the morals that Captain America had, the media just kind of presented Cap in the early 2000s as a hero who wanted what was best for America. And plus, his character was kind of boring in a sense, just kind of like, I'm the man at a time. That's all I know. So he was just kind of also stuck in the past with never really growing in any media that represented him. The only case I can really get behind that really made Captain America a true outstanding character is in the animated show Earth Mightiest Heroes.
That's some poor reporting.
So the challenge for Marvel Studios, if they wanted success in the MCU with one of the core characters in Marvel history, is making audiences connect to a World War II propaganda soldier. And I think the first thing they nailed was the man who plays the symbol to the nation. Chris Evans is no stranger to Marvel films, as for 2 films he played the hothead Johnny Storm in both of the 2000 Fox Fantastic Four movies, which he was praised for his pretty accurate on-screen adaptation from Johnny in the comics.
Johnny.
This is Dolce.
A complete opposite on who Steve Rogers is in the comics and just in general.
I can do this all day.
And even Chris Evans himself turned down the role of Captain America 3 separate times, unsure what Marvel Studios was thinking, reaching out to him and particularly wanting him to play the Star-Spangled Man on screen. Which to me connects Chris Evans as Captain America as RDJ is to Iron Man. I can't see anyone else playing the role of Captain America, and I think this whole situation of him not wanting the role originally adds to him being the perfect man for Captain America. And I feel like that's been the story for the big 3 in the MCU. A little side tangent here, but RDJ was questioned if he could be your leading man of a cinematic universe when he was cast as Iron Man. For Chris Hemsworth and Thor, they actually wanted his brother to come in and play Thor, and Chris Hemsworth was just kind of the second choice. So to look back in time and see how these three casting choices have been pivotal in building the characters to who they are today, not just in the MCU, but in general, more fans are reading the comics, enjoying whatever form of media they're in because of their portrayals. And there were a ton of names who auditioned for Captain America, some who have actually gone on to have very promising roles and characters in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Wyatt Russell is probably the most interesting case. He auditioned for the role, and years later, after Steve Rogers is no longer in the MCU, he gets casted as John Walker, aka US Agent, a character very similar to Steve, and the fact that he wants to be Captain America. He was in the most recent Thunderbolts movie. A co-star in this film, Sebastian Stan, also auditioned for Captain America, but ended up being Steve's BFF, Bucky Barnes. Chris Pratt auditioned, went on to become Star-Lord, leader of the Guardians of the Galaxy. Wilson Benthel is Bullseye in Daredevil and is absolutely phenomenal in that role. I could never see John Krasinski as Captain America, but I always wanted him to be Mr. Fantastic, and we did get that in the MCU in Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. The only other real choice I could see apart from Chris Evans is Jensen Ackles, but the wildest reports I found are Kevin and Joe Jonas. I am really concerned who allowed that to happen. My point is, with listing all those names, is none of them could really bring what Chris Evans brought to the character of Steve Rogers. And this was one of the first true, serious roles I saw Chris Evans act in, and he gave it his all. I don't think I'm such a big fan of Captain America in general if it isn't for Chris Evans' performance. Everything he does feels so real, especially later on in the MCU. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the First Avenger, baby. I find him being skinny and then turning into 250 pounds of pure muscle is still some great CGI in the MCU, especially for its time, and I think it still holds up today. Obviously, if you really squint your eyes and start looking at the mistakes, you're gonna find them. But I feel like that's the big point people miss in this movie. It's not Steve is skinny, turns into a superhero, and then that's the story. No, there's still a lot of character arc that I feel goes under the bridge that people don't understand or seem to see. Steve wants to join the army because he wants to help people. He hates to see the little guy get beat down. He hates bullies. But once he gets the super soldier serum and becomes super buff, super strong, has all these enhanced abilities, now what? The one guy who did truly believe in him, Dr. Abraham Erskine, dies. Erskine chose him not because of what he could become, but because of who he is. And it's almost like another Jensen moment from the first Iron Man movie. For once, someone acknowledges Steve's dreams and ambitions and understands who he is and why he wants to be. It's not because he wants the glory, the fame. It's truly because he just wants to help out people and win the war. And I think that's why I really enjoyed the movie as a kid. I used to be an incredibly skinny kid, and yeah, for a while I wanted to have the muscle and be really buff and have super enhanced abilities. But even after Steve gets all of this, he's still the same person. He still has fears. He still has a confidence problem of standing on his own 2 feet and speaking of what he truly thinks. This movie isn't perfect. Red Skull is one of the biggest problems in the movie because he is a much more popular, established villain in the comics compared to maybe some of the other villains that have been present in the MCU so far, apart from maybe Loki. His whole purpose is tied to how S.H.I.E.L.D. got the Tesseract in the first place, but he does reappear later on in the MCU in both Infinity War and Endgame, which is nice to see him after all this time. But I do like some of the changes they made to this film to make me feel more modern. Bucky Barnes, instead of being a young sidekick, kind of like Robin is to Batman, is Steve's best friend since childhood. Someone who's always looking out for him, who does believe in Steve but understands that, hey, he's going to get himself killed and I need to do my best to take care of him. Which I think makes Bucky's quote-unquote death more sadder than it would have been if he was just some young lad sidekick helping take down Hydra bases.
Grab my hand!
Up to this point in the MCU, the relationship has been Pepper and Tony, but I think Peggy and Steve really give them a run for their money. Peggy Carter is an incredible character, a powerful woman in the military. During World War II, may I remind you again, during World War II. And as a lot of the other soldiers see Peggy as a woman, as something that, hey, maybe I could swoon her over, Steve sees her as a person, as someone to respect in the military, which again goes back to Dr. Erikstein choosing him to be Captain America. Shout out to Dominic Cooper as a young Howard Stark, one of the best castings in the MCU. It just works. It feels like it's Tony Stark's father if he was just younger. To me, I think this is how you modernize a film in the most perfect way. It maybe not film is the right word, just media. A piece of media in the most perfect way to a live action adaptation. Does the third act go into the whole superhero like, yes, here is Captain America? Yeah, but I think it's justified. For one, Steve is being respected as a leader, and not because he's following the American dream, but because he's doing what he believes is right. He goes behind the Colonel's back to go save Bucky and the Howling Commandos. Not because it'll give them some advantage in the war they have with Hydra, no, but because he believes it's the right thing to do. And maybe Bucky being in there plays a factor, but, right in. Comic books have always been a representation of the world around us, and they tell the stories of many backgrounds. The X-Men represent marginalized groups in media. Professor X and Magneto are literally Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X, respectively. The Fantastic Four deal with the complex relationships that families bring on, the balancing of your work life and your personal life. And for me, a Latino male, to find Captain America to be my favorite superhero, it isn't because of the American morals and the American dreams. It's because he does what he believes is the right thing. I feel like most common audiences believe that whatever the government wants is what Steve wants. But no, what Steve wants is what he believes is right. He is the voice of the people, not the nation. This becomes more present in later films, but in the First Avenger, Dr. Abraham Erikstein defines that Captain America is
not a perfect soldier, but a good man.
This film did a lot for me as a kid and was a building point of who I wanted to be in my life. Again, I was a very skinny kid who was not particularly the best in anything except maybe drawing. But I always wanted to help people out, even if that meant allowing myself to be walked over in the process. I think even back then, it was this morally complex character that drove me in. And I think it all starts with Chris Evans and who he is as a person and what he believes in represents also what Captain America believes in. A story of doing what's right and hoping that others follow is the story of Captain America. He is
a symbol to the nation. A hero to the world. The story of Captain America is one of honor, bravery, and sacrifice.
Thank you all so much for watching this love letter to Captain America, the First Avenger. With the 5th film in the MCU done, that means we finally met all 6 Avengers, which means I cannot explain to you all how excited I am to rewatch this film. I've even paused my Lego Avengers 100% completion run because I don't want it to be spoiled. That's not the right word. Or more so reminded of what to expect. But anyways, tune in next week for the conclusion of Phase 1 with the Avengers.